Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, brought to you by Believe. Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia here with you this week for the show. Jasper, my friend, not a whole lot going on in Pistons land, but we're back here this week to talk about what the very little bit that is going on as we really get towards these final games of the year. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing okay. I'm trying to think. I missed the last podcast, so I wasn't here for the Pistons. Second win in their last 20 some odd games or whatever it is, which was sad. But don't worry, folks. They're back on another 4-game losing streak, and Buddy Boeheim is playing more than ever. So, I'm doing okay. I'm trying to think. Aaron, did we put the new little intro that I made for this week? Is that going to be playing at the beginning of this podcast?
It will be. So super excited. That was a creation by the man himself, Jasper. So Jasper put that together. And for those of you that are here now, you just got your first official look at the new Palace of Pistons podcast intro. So shout out Jasper. That was some great stuff.
Yes. I also loved listening to it. Like we both just did live. For sure, that happened. For me, that was probably the most exciting thing that happened this last week in terms of the Piston. It was either that or Marvin Bagley scoring 31 points. So other than that, we don't have that much more to go. But Aaron, we are coming into the final stretch. Pistons have 9 more games left this season. We're almost done. April 9th. It's coming up fast.
It couldn't be here soon enough with the roster that the Pistons are putting on the court on a nightly basis. Just between sitting Bogdanovich and Stewart, Diallo, all those guys. Alec Burks has quietly been shelved.
Livers.
Well, Isaiah Livers is hurt again. It's just been such a nightmare. And we are nearing the end by the grace of the powers above. So I think with that, I think we should probably start to get into it. Before we get into it, though, let's talk about our weekly sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your college basketball betting. As we get into March Madness, get analysis of every player, prop, and point at BetOnline. You'll find the latest odds, bracket contests, team matchups, and game trends only at BetOnline. Updated odds for everything from live games to the Sweet 16, right through to the Final Four and championship game. BetOnline is your college basketball headquarters this season. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Be sure to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your bonus. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. It's been a crazy March Madness. It's been a lot of fun, and it's also been nice that the Pistons' schedule has not been super, super crazy over the last week, which has made it easier to dive into all of March Madness. Jasper, have you been following along? Do you have a team in it that you think looks like they're your team to win it at this point? Or
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I actually had a little bracket going. I've only lost one of my Elite 8 teams so far, so I'm looking pretty good. I'm in the 99.7th percentile for brackets. I have Alabama winning it all. I still think they look pretty good, but this is going to sound crazy. The matchup I'm most nervous for in terms of that bracket is actually their matchup with Tennessee. And I never thought the day would happen where I'd say, I think that a Rick Barnes coached team is the biggest obstacle in front of a team winning a national title. Rick Barnes and postseason success, not exactly going hand in hand, but I think those two teams both have a really great shot at winning it all. And also, I sneakily think FAU has a great chance to make the Final Four. I put a little bet on them before the tournament started to make it out of the East. So I think they have a really good shot still. I'm interested to see what happens. We're going to start watching the games right after we finish wrapping up this podcast. Michigan State is actually going to be playing in Madison Square Garden. I was thinking about going, and then I saw ticket prices were $250 a piece. So I'm watching at home. How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I picked Alabama, at the beginning of my bracket. They just, on both sides of the court, seemed like the best team. And obviously they're still in it, so I think they got a shot. Didn't think Tennessee would get this far. Very excited for the Michigan State-Kansas State game that we're going to be watching right after we finish recording this. Kansas State plays really fun. Also, Texas has been a blast.
Yeah.
Like they could win it too. March Madness has been great. The theatrics this year have been great. I mean, I said it with my buddies before the tournament started, but really felt like this year it was wide open for anyone. And we've seen some crazy matchups. We've seen some crazy upsets. So I just love everything about March Madness. It's just the absolute best. So excited to watch it over this next weekend, and then we get into that the Final Four championship game. I'm really, really excited to see who wins it this year because I think the field is open, even though I'm probably going with the betting favorite in Alabama.
Yeah. Oh, man. There's really no reason for me to say this considering it's going to come out after the game is played, but I think Michigan State's going to have their hands full with Noel tonight. Man, he's electric. And the really nice thing about watching these tournament games, especially with the Pistons not playing, is that it does really give you a chance to look at some of the players that the Pistons might be looking at next year. Jarris Walker for Houston in the draft. Obviously, Brandon Miller is a big-time topic of conversation for the Pistons if they land the third pick or even the number 2 pick in some people's eyes. So it's a really great opportunity also to see what some of these prospects, some of these players that the Pistons are really going to have to be considering, depending on where they land in the draft, what they're able to do in big time moments against big time competition in the NCAA tournament.
Well, one position that the Pistons and Troy Weaver shouldn't be drafting for on draft night is the center spot. And that's because the Pistons have quite a few centers on the roster, and they're all pretty young. Jalen Duren, James Wiseman, Isaiah Stewart, Marvin Bagley can play some center. They have a lot of bigs on the roster. It's been a storyline that has been a part of this franchise since Troy Weaver took over. And right now he's put together a pretty interesting crop of big men. Not a topic that we haven't talked about before at length, but the what we're talking about today, I think, is interesting because there's going to be two sides to this discussion, and people feel very passionately regarding which side they're on, and that is James Wiseman and Jalen Duren. Now, Wiseman has been the team's starting center as shortly after he arrived to Detroit. Jalen Duren was out when the Pistons traded for Wiseman, and since Duren has returned from injury, Wiseman has maintained his spot as the starting center. Jalen Duren's been coming off the bench. I think it's an interesting discussion. I tweeted out before the Hawks game, after it had been some time since Duren had returned from injury, that I thought it was crazy that he was coming off the bench and both Wiseman and Bagley were starting over him. I think the large majority of the people that engaged with that tweet agreed, but there was a very, very vocal minority who vehemently disagreed. And there were multiple people saying that they believe Wiseman is the more valuable, more important player to this team moving forward than Jalen Duren. Jasper, I think I know where you stand on that topic as a whole, but what have been your thoughts on how the Pistons have managed James Wiseman and Jalen Duren now that they're both on the roster together and they're both active and playing?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think really one of the biggest reasons why the big men are such a topic of conversation is that the other positions are totally, there's nothing to talk about there. There's nothing to talk about in the backcourt. Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey are the future of that position for this team. There's nothing to talk about on the wings because, well, the Pistons don't have any of them. So the big men really are the only true unknown at the moment. When it comes down to it, me personally, like you, I think, correctly assumed, I stand on the side that I think Jalen Duren, to me, is a better prospect. I like what James Wiseman has brought offensively in terms of his scoring. And honestly, over the last few games, he's passed it a little better than he had before as well. But I think what Duren brings to your team in terms of rebounding, especially on the offensive glass, and in terms of screen setting, and in terms of defensive potential, not necessarily defense right at the moment, because both he and Wiseman are both really limited defenders, as many young big men are. I think what Duren brings to you as a complete player is more intriguing, especially when you bring passing into it. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I was high on Duren when the Pistons drafted him. He showed a lot of passing chops in college when he was playing for Memphis. The ability to face up a little bit and shoot from 8-10 feet out, those were things that he did. He hasn't really done that this year, but that's because he hasn't had much of an opportunity to. And what I've seen from him over the last few weeks is more of those looks. So for me, I think the way I look at it, look, I don't agree that Bagley and Wiseman is inherently a better combination than, say, Bagley and Duren, or even Wiseman and Duren. I don't necessarily think that it makes a meaningful difference there. But if the idea is that your backups next year are going to be Killian Hayes, James Wiseman, and Marvin Bagley, I think it actually makes sense to play all three of those guys together in the starting lineup this year, because you can't really bring them all off the bench. You kind of need to start Killian Hayes and Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman. Otherwise, you're just talking about a starting lineup that has no pop in it offensively. So while I don't agree that Wiseman is the better prospect, I actually think to a certain extent, it does make sense that he's starting right now, simply because the players that he's playing with are the players he's going to be playing with next year as well. I'm interested to see if you have a different view of that, or if that, viewpoint changes anything for you.
Yeah, and there were some people saying, like, it doesn't matter, it's the end of the season, like, just let it play out, like, they want to see what Wiseman can give them. And, I just don't, like, I get that you can do that, but also, like, at the expense of Jalen Duren, who has had such a good season, and, for someone who was talked about as being raw and it was going to take time with him, and there was even the speculation of this is a guy that might start the season, might spend some time in that first half of the year in the G League, for him to go out and earn that starting spot, only to have it taken away from him by a guy that wasn't in the rotation on the last team he was on. And quite frankly, it's not like he's necessarily outplaying Jalen Duren by any stretch of the imagination. It just felt wrong. It felt odd from that standpoint. And on the flip side, the whole idea, at least from what was reported, of trading for James Wiseman was, yes, they wanted to start him, but they wanted to start him alongside Jalen Duren and play Wiseman at the 4. And we haven't seen them start a game yet together. We just started seeing them play together on the court in the Denver game. And, that is something that if you do want to start James Wiseman for the last few weeks of the season, like, fine, like, do it. But, like, let's start Jalen Duren too, because if that really is something that you're interested in, you're really interested in going big like that, then let's try it with those two guys, because Duren is your starting center moving forward. I don't think it's necessarily fair to him, even if these games don't really matter, to just be like, okay, you're not starting. Like, this is a guy that it's not like he doesn't need the reps. It's not like he doesn't need those minutes against the other team's best center, getting those scripted plays right at the beginning of the game, playing against those defensively, getting those in offensively. Like, I think those things matter. Again, these stats, they're small sample size, so you can't lean into them too much, although they're exactly what I would expect if we're being honest. The two-man lineup of Wiseman and Bagley is minus 6.8 in 13 minutes per game, over 8 games this season. So the numbers not necessarily supporting that. Not that the numbers are much better with Duren and Bagley. They're minus 5 in the net rating, plus minus. We knew that was going to be the case, right? Like, we knew Bagley's not a good defender. Duren's raw. Wiseman's not a good defender. He's also raw. Like, we knew the numbers were not going to bear out well for these guys playing together, because a lot of their deficiencies coincide with one another. But at the same time, if you're going to try it for a team that has been so outwardly vocal about what they believe in James Wiseman being and what they want to do with James Wiseman, it feels like, yeah, even though these are the final games of the year, maybe you should find a way to play Duren and Wiseman together. Maybe you should start together. I mean, in the 2 games that they've played together, the minutes are minuscule that they've played together, but they're only a minus 2.5 together. So it's like, I feel like that's something that should be expanded upon more and given more of an opportunity than rolling with Wiseman and Bagley, who are both bad rebounders for their position, who are relatively the same player offensively, have the same deficiencies defensively, where they're out of position. They're not, necessarily playing the hardest on that side of the court. So that's kind of where my mind's at with it. I don't think it's fair to take away from what Jalen Duren has done this year. And again, I'm just not a big believer in Bagley. I'm not necessarily a huge believer in Wiseman, even though he's outperformed my expectations for him so far. I just don't necessarily love the move, but I was very surprised by the vocal minority of that tweet, where they were like, yeah, Wiseman's the guy. This really shouldn't even be something we're talking about. Wiseman's the big of this team's future.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I don't really get that idea, but I also, I agree with you in the sense of look, I think the idea that Bagley and Wiseman and Bagley and Duren being such a radically better pairing than Duren and Wiseman, to me, that doesn't make sense. There's nothing really to suggest that Marvin Bagley is so good at playing power forward compared to how James Wiseman would be at power. I mean, they do the same thing. Neither guy can shoot. Neither guy is a great rebounder. Neither guy defends well in space. So the idea that Bagley can play power forward but Wiseman can't, that just doesn't click with me. I'm totally with you there. Like I said, I think it's probably just we want to get the guys who are going to be playing together, but I also agree with you there too. I think Duren's shown that he's deserved playing time. I think he's shown that he's been the best big on this roster for the vast majority of the year as well. So I get what you're saying in that sense. I think for me, what it comes down to, it's kind of the same reason why Killian Hayes got benched for a few games for Alec Burks. I think Dwayne Casey just can't see the team come out and score 18 points in the first quarter every game. He just wants that offensive pop. And if you're looking at it objectively at this point, Bagley Wiseman does provide you with more offense than Duren and Wiseman or Duren and Bagley would. I think it really is that simple.
Fair enough. I thought this was a discussion that we should have. I thought, with how little is going on with the team right now, the games don't matter. A lot of the key players aren't playing. Thought this was an interesting discussion to have, and certainly understand, the idea behind it. Doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it, but I at least can understand, and I think you did a good job kind of playing devil's advocate there. As well.
I mean, if I'm good for anything, hey man, I followed it up by being the main character on Pistons Twitter the very next day. So I get it, man. Sometimes you're just like, what the hell is going on here? It's crazy. You get people saying that you're saying things you didn't say. I'm sorry.
Got to be able to spin your own narratives.
I did not think that saying that successful NBA rebuilds, generally speaking, don't take 6 years. I didn't think that was a controversial opinion, but apparently it is. So whatever. Just look at the amount of teams that they rebuild for 6 years. They go, oh, you can look at all the ones that, spend longer. You go, oh, well, it took them 10 years to rebuild. Yeah, that's because they did a second rebuild after the first one failed. Look at like the Orlando Magic. Right, exactly. That's basically what the Pistons are doing right now. They failed their first rebuild. Now they're doing the second one. So that to me is, I don't know. That just to me is silly. Rebuilds take 4 or 5 years. Otherwise, you got to blow it up.
We're also completely changing what we've been told of 2023, 2024 is the year the Pistons are planning to, make that leap. Like the 2023 offseason, the Pistons are making.
Yes. Yeah.
To take that leap in that next year, and now all of a sudden that's changing. Even though, hey, that's been the story now since 2021 when the team added Cade Cunningham. It was still said, hey, it's going to be a few years, but it's going to be then 2023 that offseason. There it is, and now all of a sudden,
no.
Stories being.
It takes longer. They need to suck next year too. I'm like, oh, okay, wow. All right,
okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not stupid.
I'm just saying that has worked great for the Sacramento Kings and the Minnesota Timberwolves. It has worked perfectly for them over the last 2 decades. So yeah, let's do that.
This is what all this come through. We could have this discussion for a whole podcast and more, but
no, we need to talk about something more exciting. RJ Hampton.
Yeah. A potential key piece for this team moving forward, by the way.
What do you mean? That he has the keys to the gym because he's opening up when the real players go to practice? I'm sorry, that's mean.
This team is such a joke. But okay, let's move into a topic that we're not going to spend too much time on this week. There's only so many guys that can really be talked about in this conversation right now. Pistons schedule has been a little bit lighter too, which has contributed to this. But it's our weekly stock report. Jasper, you and I are pretty much in lockstep on both sides of the equation here. Again, not a ton of players to really pick from. There's not a whole lot of stuff happening with this team, and there haven't really been any significant performances to, kind of sway and change opinions or have differing opinions here. But our stock up and stock down picks. What do we have this week, Jasper?
Oh, well, I'll hit us with the stock up guy because the stock down guy is going to make me sad. Stock up. We have to go with my boy, Rodney McGruder, the scavenger, as I like to call him, McGrussy. The guy's just been on fire lately. Stretching back to that Indiana Pacers win, he is averaging over his last 5 games, 15 points, 6 rebounds, a steal and a half, an assist and a half per game, and he's doing it all on. Now, this is the crazy thing. He's shooting 42% from the floor on 12.8 shots per game, but he's shooting 47% from 3 on 7.2 attempts. He has hit every single one of his 5 free throws as well. The dude is he's killing it right now. He is in absolute flamethrower mode. I'm talking Wayne Ellington, January 2021. Just the guy can't miss. And he's been a huge part of the Pistons playing pretty close games against, obviously, Indiana. They won that one, but also they hung in tight with Denver. They hung in tight with Miami for a long time. And he has been a huge part of that. So I think Rodney McGruder, the scavenger, he is absolutely my stock up guy for this week. I think he's just been awesome. And he's shown exactly why he's stuck on this team. When a player is professional, and even if they sit on the bench all year long, they come out and they go off and they play winning basketball and they go about their business. You can't underestimate how important that is to a locker room. And if you think it isn't, just ask Houston. Just ask the Rockets how important guys like that are, because they don't have any of them. So Rodney McGruder, stock up, not just on the court, but in my heart as well.
Nothing like watching Rodney McGruder get up 15 shots in a game in the middle of March. It just really doesn't get any better than that. And it shows the great future ahead for this team that we have been sold on. I guess I'll give our stock down. It's your Syracuse boy. It's Buddy Bacon. I mean, not too many guys to choose from, right? Not many, we could say the same players week in and week out, but Buddy Boeheim's just not an NBA player. Like the Pistons have tried to get him in, and it's just so obvious how like some guys that are, G League players, like there's like, okay, this is like they're just one step too slow. Like they're one level in the game behind the rest of these guys. Buddy Boeheim's like 4 or 5 levels behind, and it's just so painfully obvious anytime he gets on the actual court, and it's so mean. Like it's not like it but it is what it is. It was a joke that the Pistons brought him in on a 2-way contract, that they would give up one of the 2-way slots that, other franchises use to find actual players. Not that it's always going to happen, but we've seen it happen numerous times. Like at this point, it would have been better to just keep Luka Garza. I don't know. This guy's just not an NBA player, and it's a shame that nepotism gave him a contract in the NBA, but he's not a player. It's not going well. The Pistons can't really even get him in these games that don't matter in late March because he's just so far behind the rest of the players in the league.
Aaron, I am disgusted by this slander you have put on Jim Boeheim's youngest son. Here's the fact of the matter, Aaron. Now, Buddy Boeheim, he might be shooting 15% from the floor over the last 5 games. He may be a 3-point shooter who is shooting under 15% from 3 for the season. That is all true. Yes, of course. He might be too slow. He might not be able to play defense. He might not be able to pass. He might not be able to shoot. But the fact of the matter is, Aaron, on the season, in his 7 games played, the Pistons have a net rating of plus 13.7. That is the best mark of any player for the Pistons who's gotten more than 1 game. And guess what? That defensive rating while he's on the court, you guessed it, it is a sweet 95. Nobody better on the team than him. Aaron, I'm disgusted. I'm ashamed. I think that your desire to overlook all the statistical evidence that Buddy Boeheim is a winner and a guy who makes the team better by sacrificing his own personal stats and glory, I think you've done him a great disservice, and I think you're doing this team a great disservice. So I don't agree with you. I think Buddy Boeheim is a great American and a great player, and that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, that's just the Syracuse brotherhood standing together. So I shouldn't have said anything. That's irresponsible.
He's playing winning basketball. What more do you want?
Hey, numbers never lie. Numbers never lie.
He is plus 2 over the last 5 games. I'm just saying. They win the minutes he's on the court. I'm just saying.
Hey, Buddy Boeheim. Yeah, fine. Let's try it. Last couple games of the year, Buddy Boeheim, Wiseman, Marvin Bagley front court. Let's do it. Have some fun with it. RJ Hampton and Jared Rhoden. I mean, that's about as good as it's going to get for this team with the last few games this year and the guys that are actually suiting up for him. Okay, let's move into our final topic. A little bit of a shorter podcast this week, but again, there's just not so much going on with the team. Talking about Eugene Omoruyi, who just signed a contract today to extend his contract throughout the remainder of the season. Played through 2 10-day contracts with the team, and now Detroit has inked him to a deal that will keep him on the roster for the remainder of the season. Tying this in with RJ Hampton, who also earned a contract. It's a non-guaranteed deal for next year, so he's going to be battling for a roster spot in training camp. Would imagine that Omoruyi ends up in the same position. Part of the end of the season for the Pistons over the last few years has been giving these guys that come in on 10-day contracts or 2-way contracts, giving them those extra minutes, that extra opportunity, and earning contracts to compete for a spot on next year's roster. We've seen it with guys like Tyler Cook. Last year it was someone like Carson Edwards. In a 2-way spot, Luka Garza kind of earned that opportunity playing through Summer League and initially signing I believe it was a 2-way deal, and then he ended up converting to a standard or something along those lines. But every year we see the Pistons giving these guys an opportunity to come in, earn that initial contract, and then fight for roster spots next year. Now, it hasn't always been successful. In fact, it's mostly not been successful, but you do look at the way that Omoruyi and Hampton have played so far with Detroit, and you have to wonder, the Pistons are going to have some roster spots available next year. This is a team that has a lot of room to grow. They need to really find some pieces that are going to be a part of that next playoff team whenever that does come for Detroit. Do guys like Omoruyi, do guys like Hampton, who are earning these contracts, who are making the most of their minutes, who are playing well, who are playing hard on both sides of the court, like, do these guys maybe start to have a chance in your mind of potentially sticking with this team heading into next year?
Oh man, I have to be honest. I don't think so. If they're really planning on being better, while I really, really like what Eugene Omoruyi has brought to this team, as well as RJ Hampton, honestly, I think RJ Hampton has done about as well as could possibly be expected of him. I think that while they've both played to the best of their abilities, and in the case of Eugene Omoruyi, have actually, while I facetiously pointed out Buddy Boeheim's net rating, like, Eugene Omoruyi has a plus 5.4 net rating on the season, and that's not a coincidence. He has visibly helped the Pistons play better. But a big reason of that is that he is a power forward. He's a true power forward. And the Pistons haven't had a player like that on their roster. So I think you look at him and what he's brought to the team in terms of his cutting, in terms of his ability to post up. He hasn't shot really well, but he's at least been willing to shoot. And I think that everything that he's brought in those facets of the game, as well as defensively, has really just shown that's something the Pistons are missing really desperately. And while he isn't necessarily a player that I see sticking on this team long-term as anything more than like the 15th man on the bench or on a two-way contract or something like that, I think what Troy Weaver and what the coaching staff should be looking at is the skill set that he brings to the team and how useful it's been. That being said, he's absolutely earned this contract. The Pistons are better when he's on the court than when he's off the court right now. And I don't see that changing for the rest of the season. He absolutely deserves a shot in the offseason. And we'll see, if Hamidou Diallo is going to want $9 million a year, maybe you bring back Omoruyi instead, a guy who can actually fit the roster perhaps a little bit more snugly than Diallo does, and also brings you a lot of, the little things that he does as well, both defensively and offensively, if not in terms of insane athleticism.
Yeah, I think both those guys, I think you kind of said it best for what RJ Hampton is capable of, for what Eugene Omoruyi is capable of. I think both of them have really played about as good as you could have possibly expected. I think it helps that they just play hard, right? Like, they can't really afford the mistake of just kind of giving up on plays, not playing as hard, because they're not guaranteed that money. They're not guaranteed those contracts. So they're playing just at a little bit of a higher intensity than a lot of the other guys are at this point in the season. And I think that stands out. And you certainly see it on the defensive end with the way that they compete. But like, even RJ Hampton, who, these shooting numbers aren't sustainable by any stretch of the imagination. He's not shown he's a 45% 3-point shooter, but on 2.5 3-point attempts per game, he's shooting 45% over the last 12 games that he's been with Detroit for. And that matters. Like, Hampton is playing good basketball right now, and you don't want to take that away from him or from Eugene. Like, I'm glad that they've got these contracts, because I don't need to see, and we're still getting it because so many guys are out, but I don't need to see Magruder for 35 minutes and Joseph for 35 minutes. And that's, Jared Rhoden for 35 minutes. Like, these guys are playing hard, a little bit more talented. And, at the end of the year, that the team obviously isn't prioritizing, getting guys like Burks on the court, getting them healthy, getting guys like Livers on the court, getting them healthy. Like, a lot of these guys are done for the year. Livers probably comes back here soon. I think he was questionable on the last last injury report. But at this point, like, does it even matter? You know, how long until he gets hurt again? These guys are playing hard, and they've earned that right to come into training camp next year and compete for a spot. And like you said, if Diallo wants a bunch of money, you know, what happens, you know, that Corey Joseph roster spot opens up. Like, there are going to be some roster spots available for this team to bring in some new faces and do other things with them, what they've currently been doing. So I think both these guys having that opportunity it is earned. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'll say I think maybe one of them could stick around heading into next season. I don't think it's completely out of the equation. I'll say that I've liked what RJ Hampton and Eugene Omoruyi have given this team enough that I'm very comfortable with keeping one of them as the 15th guy next year. Just it's nice seeing guys that'll play hard. Both these guys have done it, and they've had their success on both sides of the court.
Well, I think it'll depend what happens with Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley this offseason, and you know, also who the Pistons go after in free agency, the draft, blah blah blah. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, but Omoruyi is a guy I could see sticking around. Like they don't have power forwards, period. Like they don't have a real power forward on the roster other than him, and he is one. So if they don't end up, you know, signing two guys this offseason who are power forwards, or they end up moving on from one of Bagley or Stewart, I could absolutely see there being a place for him. You know, especially if Isaiah Livers, you know, is he a power forward? Yeah, he's kind of a small forward, blah, blah, blah. They have kind of different skill sets as well. So I could absolutely see Omoruyi sticking around. Worst case scenario, what this is a really good showcase for both guys to get a contract, even if it's not in the NBA, get it somewhere else where they can make some good money. I think of somebody like Derek Walton Jr. last year who came in for the Pistons and really played well. He didn't play himself into an NBA contract, but he played himself into an NBL contract and won the, you know, their equivalent to the finals MVP over there. So I think that at the very least, it's going to make your team more watchable this season and, you know, is good professionally for those guys. So yeah, I'm happy to see it, especially for Omoruyi. Like I really think he's earned this contract. So I'm happy for him.
Well, the Pistons have 9 games left this year to continue to see what Omoruyi and Hampton can offer to this team. Jaden Ivey's back in the fold for the Pistons. He was out, you know, with I believe he had COVID. He just came back a couple games ago. That was against Denver that he returned. It's good to see him back. Hopefully Isaiah Livers is back soon. Jalen Duren sounds like he is probably going to play on Friday night. So hopefully we see a lot of these guys that might be on the team next, you know, like might be a part of this team moving forward. Ivey, Livers, Duren, Wiseman, like hopefully we get to see them play together like over these last 9 games. One thing that I really want to see is I want to see a lineup that includes Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Livers, James Wiseman, and Jalen Duren. I don't know who the 5th guy in that lineup is. I know it's probably Rodney McGruder. Maybe it's Killian Hayes. I don't know. But look, I want to see the last few guys who are going to be on this team next year on the court together, getting minutes together, getting reps together, building chemistry together. Not that it builds over enough to where it matters next year, but just to, I guess, give us a glimpse of what the remaining guys that are playing can look like and that they do matter to this team's future moving forward. Because like I am very high on Jaden Ivey. I'm a big believer in Jalen Duren. If Isaiah Livers could stay healthy, this is a guy that we were talking about potentially being the starting power forward for the team this year. So there is some potential there. There is promise there. I want to see these guys play together. I don't know if we get it over the last 9 games. It seems like there's always someone hurt. We haven't necessarily seen a ton of Wiseman, Duren play together. But that is something that selfishly I'm hoping that we see to end the season. Not that, you know, it's really going to matter, but I do think it'd be nice because these lineups of Corey Joseph, Rodney McGruder, Eugene Omoruyi, RJ Hampton, like it just Buddy Boeheim, it just wears on you. It makes it very hard to watch. So over 9 games, you got 9 opportunities to get all those guys on the court together and play them together at once. Please, Dwayne Casey, make it happen.
Yeah, let Jalen Duren throw more lobs. That's my last thought on the matter.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's show. A little bit of an odd show because, again, not a whole lot to talk about. But, Jasper, thanks so much for joining me. Hopefully we have Mike back next week. Just a few weeks left in the season for the Detroit Pistons, 9 games left to play. We will see what they do over those 9 games, and we'll talk about it the rest of the way through here on the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. Make sure to use our sponsor, BetOnline, for all your sports gambling needs. Use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with BetOnline. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week on the Palace of Pistons podcast.